What's up, everybody? This is Ryan here. So this is going to be the first part of a very long tutorial series where I'm going to do something which isn't really done very often. If you spent any significant time looking up tutorials on Android in particular, you'll find lots of great content, but a lot of times you'll find videos where people demonstrate basically how to build simplified topics in the context of like a God activity, or just what I'm trying to say here is they build their entire application in an activity which is really bad. That's not actually how any senior developer I'm aware of really suggests you build applications. There are lots of other people who will build applications which have already been designed. And that's useful, but it's kind of cheating a little bit. But hey, that's totally fine. I always preferred to build my own applications. So what I thought I would do in this series is basically take you from square one, from the very beginning, a completely blank Android project, all the way until publishing it. And it's my application, one that I'm actually rebuilding. And it happens to be a workout log because there are pretty much two things that I really enjoy in my spare time. And those happen to be programming and working out. And I'm only half joking about that. So anyways, what we're going to do is basically I'm just going to be releasing regular videos. And I'm just going to get to work, and I will take you through the entire process of building the application. Now, if this content is useful for you, then I must ask you, please do me a favor. Consider supporting the channel, following our social media. You'll find links down in the description box below. We have a Slack channel if you would like to get some more direct help from me and a whole bunch of other talented developers. Also, in the description box, you'll find links to my various courses on Udemy, so please do consider checking those out for Kotlin and Android development and whatever else I decide to make. And also I have some applications available on the Play Store. So, what I'm hoping is that we can kind of create a series where there's lots of questions going on that I can answer in my Q&As. And I'm going to try and make this as interactive as possible with you viewers. And it's just going to be one gigantic playlist of videos. And they'll all basically be divided and edited. And I will do my best to really create some more polished and organized content. Because one of the things I've always done with my channel is I've always tried to focus on having really good informational content. But I've never really had a whole lot of time to organize it that well. So that's one thing I will be focusing on with this particular series. I'm going to take my time with it, but hopefully I'm still going to be able to have some very regular output for the videos and interesting topics. And so with that rambling done, let us begin. So I've started with a completely new Android project. Of course, it has the old name of the application. But yeah, I literally just, as you can see here down here, 6 minutes ago, I created this project, or 6 seconds. That's not super accurate. And we're just going to get started. So the very first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to add 2 new modules to the application. So there's going to be a domain module and a data module. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do that, and then we can talk about what that means later. I'm going to go to File, Project Structure, and Modules. Just going to hit this plus button here. So, first module we will create is the domain module, which will be a plain Java library. Now this is Kotlin, but in this case we want just a plain Java library for that particular module. This one's going to be called domain. And this word domain is reference to the problem domain. I've got a good article you can check out on my Medium explaining basically what the domain of an application is, the problem domain. And for Java class name, since I know I'm going to need one, I'm going to create something called result wrapper, but we won't create that today most likely. And that's all we need to do first. Okay, now that that's done, I'm going to create another module. Oh, pending a changes? Yeah, we better do that. And this time we're going to pick Android library. So this is going to be our backend for the Android application. And the reason why I'm picking Android library is I do want some Android integration, but it's not supposed to have any kind of a front end, so that's why we're picking Android library instead. This one is going to be called Android Data. Data is basically the word I prefer to use over the term model when it comes to architectural layers. You'll see the word model, which has several overloaded definitions, but they always have to do with data, so that's why I kind of prefer to use this particular term. And yeah, everything's all set there. Alright, so as you can see, Gradle build has finished, and what I'm going to do next, this is generally the second step I will perform when I create a new application. Just going to set up some dependencies in Gradle. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up the project level build Gradle file. Notice how, so when you create a new project in Android Studio, you're generally going to be in Android view like this. I personally prefer to view the project from the project view, or whatever it's called, perspective. It just gives a accurate description of what the file system really looks like. So I just prefer that. And also don't forget, you can, when you want to look these things up, just hit, for example, if we want to see a class file, we can hit Control-N. If we want to go to a file, we can hit Control-Shift-N, then type build.gradle. And this one with the dot that looks suspiciously like a breast, and you know, that's, I didn't pick it. That will be the top level build Gradle file. So anyways, yeah, this is where we'll get started. So I used to do a couple things. I used to create a separate file called versions.gradle, and I would import the dependencies from that file and the repositories into my main build Gradle file. I feel like that's a little bit overkill. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to set up the various dependencies in this top level build Gradle file, and our various sub-modules, sub-projects will basically just get the versions from there. So with this project, I will make available the repository, and I'll basically try to push every commit for each sort of episode and include it in the description box below. If I fail to do that, please feel free to berate me in the comments. I will try to do that for everyone. However, with that being said, the things which I would not normally type out by hand if I don't need to, I won't be doing that. So instead what I'll be doing is, in this particular case, in my other project, POS Trainer, I've already configured Gradle pretty much the way I wanted it to, so I'm just going to copy and paste the versions over from that project. Just like so. And like I say, you'll be able to copy this from the repository. So, you're probably, for beginners out there, you're probably wondering, what exactly is this ext thing? Some of you have probably seen it before. So one of the things, to give you a basic rundown of how Gradle works, there's kind of a primary object or class. It's hard to describe. They use different words for it. But there's this object which I will call a project, which basically defines the settings and the variables and functions for an entire Gradle project. You can figure this out if you look up the documentation. I'm not going to go into too much detail. And ext, this basically means we are adding extensions onto that project object. So these extensions basically just add, if I were to put this into very simple English, we're basically just defining variables here, or values, in Groovy in this case. And these things will be added to this project object. There's a different name for it. They don't use the word object, but to be honest, I forget what it is. And all of this basically just means that the big project is basically going to be accessible through all of these sub-projects. So another way of maybe explaining this that might make a little bit more sense. When I type in build.gradle in the search, we have, of course, the project level build.gradle file, and then we've got the module level build.gradle files. We can think of the module level files as sub-projects, and we're going to be able to access these variables that we defined in the big project in the sub-projects. The effect of this is that we'll be able to manage things like version numbers in one single place, and that way we're not having to update them manually as hard-coded variables in, say, for example, both the app build.gradle file, the domain build.gradle file, and the Android data build.gradle file. So anyways, as you can see, I've already defined a whole bunch of things. I'm just going to go through here really quickly and look at things that I probably won't be using. I don't think I'll use Dagger for this project. So we'll just get started with that. I'll also have to be careful that I'm not double defining things here. So let's just update this value to that. 1.3.31, and then I'll need to update that down here, presumably, so that's going to be Kotlin version. I only ever need to define Gradle in this one place, as far as I'm aware, so it's not actually worth creating a variable. That's actually one thing, if you think about it. If you only ever need to type something in one place, you can make a variable to make it maybe a little bit more legible, but it's kind of an extra line if you're particularly concerned about that. As far as repositories, I think we're all good with Google and JSON, or JCenter rather. I always forget if JCenter is a superset of Maven or Maven is a superset of JCenter. Let me just Google that really quickly. Okay, yeah, JCenter covers the Maven repositories as well. These are basically just places where we download dependencies from, if you're wondering. So that's all I really need to do at this point. This is the basic Gradle configuration for a project level build Gradle file. So like I said before, the key takeaways here, you're defining things in one place so that they only have to change in one place. And what we'll do next is we'll look at actually using these definitions in the build Gradle files for the subprojects or the modules. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste over what I have from the PostTrainer project, and then I'll just adjust it from there because it's actually really quite similar. Now, when you're doing this copy and pasting stuff, you do have to be careful because you can end up copy pasting things in that aren't used, and you just want to be a little bit careful about not including extra library dependencies and bloating your dex limit arbitrarily. So yeah, let's just again have a quick look if there's anything that I don't think I'll be using. So I only need Leak Canary. I will be using Leak Canary eventually. I only need it in the app module though, so that's okay if it's just hard-coded in there. I'll just eyeball these libraries here. Yep. JUnit, yeah. Okay, that looks like all good. I will need to update this. So I don't have a common module in this project, and I don't think I'll bother with it this time. I don't necessarily plan to do a multi-platform build with this project. I will be able to adapt it to that if I need to, but I don't really plan to do that in the short term because being able to basically build for iOS as well is somewhat tricky. Okay, so I've configured the libraries for the front-end module app, and let's go ahead and do the same for the Android data module. So again, I'm just going to copy and paste this over from PostTrainer, the other project. Some of you might be wondering, what is this statement up here, implementation file tree? So you only need that if you are manually including files in the lib directory of your project, which, in specific cases, you may need to do that. So now there's a couple other things. When you're building multi-module projects, especially with Kotlin, you'll very often run into errors and inconsistencies with the JVM that you're using. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to make sure, actually one thing right off the bat, I'm also going to copy over these configurations here because I want to be using the ones from which are defined in the top level build Gradle file. Again, that was just copy pasted over from the other project. If you haven't already figured it out by now, you should probably open the repository link down in the description box below so that you too can copy and paste. And then I'm going to do the same for the build Gradle file just before I forget. Okay, so that was this one here. That's not the right name, so we'll just make sure I fix that. So this is com.yssblog.catalyft. And good, I don't have that in there. Okay. All right. Yeah, I will be using, so I have an extra option here, just I'll point this out here, vector drawables.use support library. I will be using vector drawables extensively. I forget exactly why you need to include this thing, but if you're going to be using vector drawables, I think you need to include it. Just kind of hit me. And I'll add in the same configurations for the build types. So if you're not familiar with build types, so on the left side or whichever side it happens to be on your IDE, there's this build variants tab, and you'll have debug and release. So these are basically two different ways of building your application. Release is, of course, what you use when you want to publish it to the Play Store. Debug is what you'll use when you want to just deploy it locally to your phone or an emulator or something like that. And really all that gets changed is this particular thing, minifyEnabled. So minify, basically what this does is it shrinks your code and performs some level of this big fancy word, obfuscation, which basically messes up the names of your code so that it's harder to reverse engineer it and stuff like that. So what we tend to do is we'll tend to not do that in the debug builds, and then we'll tend to do that, of course, in the production builds. One of the things about this is that you'll just need to make sure that you adequately test your release build before you actually publish it to the Play Store. And you can do that through beta testing or something like that, because oftentimes when you enable these sorts of things, it can actually cause your application to crash. And there have been some recent changes with ProGuard. So I think a lot of this stuff is actually handled automatically in... I'm just trying to think which Android Studio version do I have here. So I've got 3.4.1, and there's been some recent updates with building and code obfuscation, so you might want to just Google that. I think it's in like the pre-launch checklist or something like that on the Google developer website. Anyways, so I'm rambling away here. So the other thing I need to worry about, like I was saying before, when you're building a project in Kotlin, especially multi-module, there can be consistencies with the JVM version that you're using. So I've had to fiddle around a lot with this, and the unfortunate thing about that is I had to add quite a few different configurations, and I'm not exactly sure which ones are absolutely vital. So I'm just going to copy several of them over. So first we have this source compatibility and target compatibility. This basically is what we're trying to indicate here is we want this thing to compile to Java JVM 8, version 1.8. So I'm adding these in here. And then I'm also going to add something into the Android Gradle task here. So I'm just going to paste this in. So again, we're looking at compile options. This is basically a similar idea here. Source compatibility, target compatibility to Java version 1.8. I have noticed when I don't include this, I'm not able to basically synchronize the project. Hopefully that kind of thing will be cleaned up in future releases. But this is just partly based on my decision to compile to, if you notice in my Kotlin dependencies here, we're compiling to JDK 8. So that's basically what this is hopefully going to do, is it's going to enforce everything to play nicely with Java 1.1_8, or 1.8 I can say, to avoid crashes. So there's also, I'm going to include this in this is the Android data build Gradle file. Again, Kotlin options, JVM target 1.8. And I think that's all I need to mess with here. Couple more plugins. If you don't know what plugins are, so one of the cool things about Gradle is that it has really good defaults, but you can drastically improve or expand its functionality via the usage of these plugins. So we're going to add in Kotlin Android extensions, Kotlin capped. So if you ever see like APT, this is generally an abbreviation of Annotation Processing Tool. So this is for annotations, Kotlin Annotation Processing Tool, or whatever it is. And I think I'll probably use Room in this project. I use Realm in PostTrainer, but I think I'll use Room here. And let's go back to the app level. I'm sure I missed a plugin or two there. So again, capped extensions, that's there. We're also going to add in safe args. So this safe args is one of my favorite features from the navigation library in Android Jetpack. This allows you to send type-safe arguments between different destinations in your navigation graph. If that is like Klingon to you, I do have a tutorial in my Android 2019 tutorial series. Go and check that out on my channel. I do have a half-hour long video explaining how to set up navigation and what safe args is and stuff like that. So consider checking that out. Okay, so the final Gradle build, the final configuration for Gradle we need to look at is for the domain module, and this is generally really simple. Again, I'm just going to pull up the file in PostTrainer and see what I need to copy over. So we're going to apply, plugin Kotlin. Definitely not going to need any dependencies from there. As you can see, its source compatibility has been set to Java 7. We're going to change that to 1.8. I'm not actually sure if you can get away with just doing 8, but I'm just going to use the configurations that compile with the other project. Also, I found I need to add this fun thing in again. So this is just tasks.withType. It's so hard there's so much jargon here, but basically tasks are the things that Gradle will execute upon. And we're just, again, going to enforce that everything is targeting JVM 1.8 in order to avoid crashes. So there's not a whole lot of stuff we're going to be putting in here. So you're not going to find any Android libraries in my domain layer. And if you're building a module, there should be no Android code in there. The only thing which I really want to see in a domain module, if you're committed to using RxJava as your end-to-end sort of communication tool for your whole architecture, you can include RxJava. Just understand that's going to bind your entire architecture to RxJava. Since I'm working with Kotlin, what I would rather do is work with Kotlin coroutines. So these libraries down here are only going to be available in when I'm basically testing the application. I do want the standard library, but as we'll see, that's really all we need for dependencies, and probably building the domain layer is where I will start, because that's actually how I suggest you build applications in general. Okay, so I just did a Gradle Sync, and I got a sync failed, and the cause is plugin with ID androidx.navigation.safeargs.kotlin not found. So, what I forgot to do is in the project level build Gradle file, you actually have to add this in, add a class path into the dependencies in the project level build Gradle file. That was a mouthful. So I'm just going to, again, copy paste that over from PostTrainer, and then we'll see if that compiles. Okay, so I just did another Gradle sync, and I'm getting a new error. I haven't seen this one before. So we're saying, warning API. So it's not a build failure, but it's just a warning. Variant.getPackageLibrary is obsolete and has been replaced with variant.getPackageLibraryProvider. It will be removed at the end of 2019. So I could totally just ignore this and just let me from the future deal with it, but I think I'll have a quick look and see what the hell it's talking about. So where do I call that? Let's see here. Yeah, I didn't think I called that. So what we're going to do now is we are going to consult the Oracle, Google, and I'll try and figure out what's going on from there. Okay, so after consulting the Oracle, Google, it appears to be that this error might not actually be caused by anything on my end. It might actually just be that this is something that is being called by one of the libraries I'm importing. And so until that library is updated properly, I will continue to get this error. But like I say, I don't actually call this in my own code. So this is actually in a case where I'm just going to ignore it because it appears to be that there's nothing I can do. Anyways, that's totally fine. Could be maybe I need to update some version numbers or something like that. So I think what I'll do is I'll just go through and update as many versions as I can, and we'll see if that gets rid of the warning. If not, I'm just going to carry on like normal. Okay, so I've gone through and I've updated... actually, let me check on... I think I updated that, yeah. So I just went through and updated the version numbers again in build.gradle to what is suggested by the tooltips, and we'll just try syncing. And it looks like I misspelled... Oh, I think that's supposed to be RC-01. Let's try that. Okay, as the Germans say, das ist gut genau, good enough. So this is how to configure Gradle for a new multi-module project. So even if you're not doing a multi-module project, it's probably still not a horrible idea to basically add in your version numbers into an external file such as this. And like I say before, this is the kind of thing, yeah, if you've never written it out before, then you won't be able to copy and paste it. But this is the kind of thing when you're creating a new project, you should have this kind of stuff stored somewhere so that you can copy and paste it over, and you're not just typing it out manually every time. Okay, I think that's going to be plenty for today's episode. So what I just demonstrated to you there is basic Gradle configuration for a new multi-module Android project. And what I just showed you, a lot of that information will also apply to a single module project as well. So like I said in the beginning, if you enjoyed this content, then please do consider hitting the like button down below if you haven't already. Consider subscribing, and also if you want to know when the new episodes to this series are coming out, hit that little notification alarm bell icon thingy. Do consider supporting us by checking out the different applications I have on the Play Store, the different courses I have up on Udemy, and all the lovely links down in the description box below. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got questions, hit me up down in the description, not the description box. If you have questions, hit me up in the comments down below. I do read them. Don't always respond to them, but if you ask a good question, I'll try to give you a good answer. So thank you so much for watching. This has been Ryan, and we'll see you in the next episode.